I even showered and did my hair for Marianne today. Those of you that know me personally know that is an enormous task during gardening season. So I dropped the links in a few places. I also dropped it back in the Warriors, Marianne. So you can go ahead and unmute, Marianne. Everyone else coming in as this gets rolling, I don't have the technical skills that some groups do. So this will be just a mishmash of whoever's here. And when I turn it into something pretty later, it'll just be the speaker view so you can see my pimples and wrinkles a little bit closer. But for today, we'll give it a couple more minutes. It's just 7 o'clock. I'm going to go to Facebook and see if anyone is missing. There's always a few just a couple minutes before. Nobody's looking for me. This is fantastic. Okay. Oh, I lied. Okay. Well, so here we are. So far, I got Kathy and I got Marianne here with me. I'm going to give it about one more minute. I had a gal looking, but I think, yeah, she's in New York, so she thought it was 9 a.m. this morning. And where was I? No, 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 no. We're doing this in Marianne's time zone for a change, which I think is well overdue. You can see and hear me okay on your end?
Yes, perfectly.
You as well. Perfect. Um, I talk enough, and most of you on my page, I nag you incessantly about getting started videos and learning how I manage the group as a solo admin and specialist in the machines, maybe not a specialist in lipedema, but I'm kind of getting there. This is my 5th year celebrating Lipedema Awareness Month. And I've probably dealt with it as far as my customers my whole life. I just didn't know what it was until about 5, 6 years ago. So Marianne's kind of special in my own personal learning journey about I love learning from people in the trenches versus people in the public published domain. They're important too, but it's hard to take a piece of research or a piece of equipment or a diet, and it's always the implementation and all of those nuances along the way that you all deal with, whether it's different symptoms, whether it's different food, whether it's different stress. We don't talk about it enough, but stress causes inflammation. Exercise causes inflammation. Food causes it. Everything causes inflammation. And with you guys, it's just, on propane. But you have to understand that sometimes inflammation is a process that your body goes through. And for those of you that do not have a diagnosis, that's kind of sometimes where the struggle comes in, and until you really know truly what this thing is that's attacking your body to a degree, you're left to believe that it's just fat and it's your fault, and you need to eat less. And I gotta say, there's been a few talks already this month. We're not going to go off on a food tangent. We had a wonderful nutritionist also from Australia this year. It's all about Oz this year because you guys had that awesome purple bridge last year. The US and Canada got to step it up. But I will say that there's so many intricacies that I wanted to connect with you guys and give you a chance to not only ask Marianne questions, but myself, if you do have any. There's a little bit of a better connection. A lot of the time that I developed on the medical experience side was in Australia because I worked for a company there one time. And so I've kind of always had more Australian and New Zealand people in my circle than anywhere else. And I remember my first FDRF conference, which is the big thing in the States. I had met Dr. Herbst, but we only bumped into her because she was at a Lipedema conference in Sydney. So everything happens for a reason, and I just had to teach her how to use the machine. That's how our relationship started. So what I will say is Marianne's group. There's lots of groups that I recommend. So if you're coming to my page and you want the lipedema expert, no, 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 no. There's other places I'll deflect you, depend on where you're at. I certainly have some info, but Marianne and the Warriors group in particular, I know there's subgroups out of that as well. But it's not just about one thing. So if you are coming to this realization or suspect you have something, it's a really good resource. And long before I kind of had my own group or knew a lot of the US groups, I would dump them on Marianne's lap because there was just such a healthy history already of information out there. It was just the spelling that confused everyone. And then I really got to know Marianne, and I'm going to move to an intro here shortly. It was probably about 4 years ago, and you may or may not remember, but I always joke that she's my POTS go-to gal because there was a situation where, I don't want to say I told you so, but there's no way that's not going to sound like that. But there's a reason when you start out on these machines, I want you to be conservative. Conservative means less time, less intensity. And a gal with POTS broke out with like severe hives. It looks like she was attacked by a beehive. And I have seen these reactions before, but if you're, that's one of those things that may happen with excess use. So there's reasons but I didn't realize, I knew POTS and I knew that, with activity, but with a machine, it just happens quicker. And, I kind of understood what was going on, but I wasn't quite certain. So what do we do? Do we not do it? So Marianne simply came, well, whatever you would normally do with activity, like, do you take an antihistamine? Do you, so sometimes, there's things that you guys, because you live and manage with these conditions every day, it's different than someone like myself at arm's length, or the researchers where they sit down at the table and everybody gets a copy and they all get donuts. No offense if there's researchers here. I'm one, so I'm shooting myself in the ass. But it's, peer reviewed and the way that research is going because of the price associated with, I don't think lipedema is really all that rare. Just putting it out there. And if the math is true, I don't know, it's different in parts of the world. So I'm going to use the 1 in 9 number. I know it's sometimes 1 in 11. I don't know that there's any hard fact on that, more than opinion and data. But do you realize that that's as prevalent as diabetes? Yep. But look, we talked about this on a chat the other day. Look at the resources available out there and the knowledge. You walk into any doctor's office and say, oh, I got diabetes, and they're on it. But lipedema, it's, for many of you, it's been a lifelong battle. So I love hearing the story side of it. So I'm going to introduce Marianne now, if she needs introduction. And I would like you, what kind of got you decided, why did you get involved with this group? What are ways that your members can help you facilitate such a large group? Hint, hint, there's probably some files there to review. And understand that if you are in the local area, there's lots of information all over the place, but sometimes, dealing locally, the legislation, the paperwork, it's good to connect if you're not in Marianne's group now. If you're in the New Zealand or Australia area, there's subgroups, as I said, because when you do get to the point, if you do get a doctor and you do get a diagnosis, then it's a whole bunch of other paperwork to get the care stuff done. And, if you have any energy left by the time you get there. So over to you, Marianne. Why did you sign up for this badge?
Well, thank you, first of all, Debbie, for inviting me to speak to your members, and I feel very privileged to be here. I was diagnosed a very long time ago. I'm one of those rare birds that was diagnosed, and it's actually just 25 years ago.
Wow.
I had fallen over at work and trying not to get myself impaled on a child's scooter, I twisted my back. And we had a gorgeous young girl, and she said to me, "My dad's a chiropractor. You go and see the chiropractor." And I wasn't real keen on chiropractors, but I thought, oh, you know. And he did a manipulation. He said, "I'm not worried about your back. Not worried about it at all. It's soft tissue injury. We'll just massage, a little bit of manipulation, and you'll be as good as new. But I'm more concerned about your ankles. Your ankles are very swollen, and it can be lots of different things, and you need to go and get it sorted." So I went to my doctor, and he's a gorgeous guy. He's now retired or semi-retired, but and he looked at me and he said, "Marianne, you're just like me. You're just putting on a little bit of middle-age spread." And I had discussed it with a friend who's a nurse, and she said, "You go and see Dan O'Donnell." And Dan O'Donnell was a specialist physician here in Western Australia, and he worked on the diabetes unit at Fremantle Hospital. So I just said to Graham, "Well, I'd really like to get a second opinion." He was fine with that and sent me off. And the first thing he did, he said, I took a family history, talked to him about my granny having the piggy little feet and the big prominent cuffs hanging over her shoes, and he said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Well, I want to rule out something else. I'm going to send you for a test." I had a lymphocytogram, and afterwards he diagnosed me with lipedema. He told me it was extremely rare, and basically to get myself into compression. And that was 25 years ago. And then fast forward to about 9 years ago, I had a different doctor, and she did the old get on the scales and, "Oh, you're obese, you've got to lose weight." And I looked at her, I said, "I'm not obese." I said, "How many obese people do you know that have a normal size waist?" And I popped my leg up onto the bench and I said, "Stop looking at the scales and look at me." And I popped my leg up onto the edge of the bench of her desk, and she said, "Oh my God, you've got lymphedema." I said, "No, I don't. I have lipedema. Go back through my files." Anyway, she was too lazy to do that, so she sent me off to a lymphedema specialist who had just been up to Darwin to a conference where Dr. Herbst was. So she had just learnt all about lipedema. And so she sat me down and she asked me about it. She said, "Oh God, you know more than I do." And I said, "Well, people with the disease usually do." And so she sent a letter off to my doctor, another letter off to my doctor, and that was my diagnosis. And she told me about some Facebook groups. I wasn't on Facebook very much at that time, so I decided to join a couple of them. And eventually, a really, really wonderful person, uh, um, Anka Savisi, decided just 8 years ago that she had been just diagnosed and was devastated. And she decided that she wanted to start a new Facebook group. So she invited me to be an admin right from the get-go. And she wanted it to be different to a lot of the other groups. A lot of the other groups, there was sort of like an air of, you know, depression and an air of it's not so bad now in some groups, but there was this air of, you know, woe is me, the world has ended, I've got lipedema. And she wanted to start something a little bit different. And she is our foundress. She's still very, very heavily involved with us, but she also has a very high-powered job that takes her time. So the Lipedema Warriors was formed, and the idea behind the Warriors was to provide a safe place for people with lipedema to find out and learn about the disease and to support and teach one another about the disease. We wanted it to be most of the groups, or many of the groups at that particular time, 8 years ago, were really pushing surgery. And, you know, there are lots of people who can't have surgery. for lots of reasons. I'm 72. I'm too old. My skin just would not cope with having surgery. So I have to rely on conservative methods. There are lots of people, surgery is just so expensive, and there are lots of people who are never going to be able to afford surgery. So we wanted it to be a place that actually was focusing on conservative treatments and conservative methods of coping with your lipedema. Now, we've branched out. There's lots of surgery discussions as well, because, you know, we want to support everybody, but that's the reason that we started. You know, things like manual lymphatic drainage, compression, diet, exercise, all of those things that have a lot to play, a big role to play in lipedema. And that's basically where we started. We started small, but we got big quite quickly. We started here in Australia, and it wasn't very long before we actually became what I refer to as an international lipedema support group, administrated from Australia. But in saying that, we have administrators in the UK, we have administrators in America, we have had one from Sweden. So, you know, as people, you know, find the time and their lives change and they drop back in and out, but there's a core of us who have been right here from the beginning. You know, we're very proud of what we've started. As you said, we've branched out, and there are lots of reasons why we have branched out. But that's the background of the Lipedema Warriors. And the wonderful Anka Savisi has been an absolute Trojan of a advocate for people with lipedema, and we follow her example.
That's fantastic. And it's, you know, there's a few things, because I don't have lipedema, in case you didn't know. You know, I'm the shaky machine lady, for those of you that are joining, if you aren't aware of who I am. But Marianne hit the nail on the head, and your theme, I think part of the reason we relate so well is the self-care, the bigger umbrella of conservative. You know, you always want to try the non-invasive stuff first, you know, skip the surgeries. But a lot of times, you know, part of I think the tragedy, just circling back on a couple things that you said, you know, that there is, with any diagnosis, not just lipedema, but there's a darkness that sets upon your heart and your spirit. And even when I came in, you know, probably very similar time frames that our groups just started growing. And I think I have the approach in my group, you know, you don't need a diagnosis for self-care. You know, I live in a country
right.
here in Canada where lipedema doesn't even exist. So you can't, you know, you can travel and get a diagnosis, but it's going to do nothing for your self-care. And in Canada, you know, everybody thinks we have free healthcare. Well, you know, you don't want to just go to any lipo guy that you can qualify getting coverage for. It's just, so it's sad, because there's, you know, 1 in 9 possibly dealing with this. So I think the darkness comes from that initial, that desperation, you know, and then we all go through that. I'm new and I have all these common questions period. And I think part of the reason the groups have gone so international is you hit the nail on the head. No one knows these conditions, how to care for them, what the symptoms are, what the doctor is, you know, who's going to slam the door in your face better than the people living with the conditions. And I think the last 4 or 5 years, whether we wanted to or not, we all got forced how to do these kind of things. I used to do Zoom, Facebook Lives in the group, but I never did stuff like this. And now, you know, I've learned so much by spending time with Marianne. You know, there's no one path to managing the symptoms, but it certainly doesn't mean it's a death sentence. I don't mean to sound so dramatic, but I love the word conservative. It doesn't sound like too much of a commitment. It doesn't sound too scary. But at the same time, you know that there's never one path. So when you say it might be compressions, maybe you know, you don't really focus on, we have to be very careful in some of these groups too, because of the regulations, and Canada's very much like Australia. I can't say certain words, even though they fall out of my mouth all the time. What I can say in the States is whatever I want. So you got to be, you know, we're not doctors, we're not here to diagnose or treat, but you know, it takes a lot of time, a lot of thought, and a lot of energy to build up the material that a group like yours has accumulated over time. And you know, don't be overwhelmed. And if you're new to Marianne's group or my group or this condition, you know, sometimes the best coping is learning. You know, it becomes less, you know, it sounds scary when you're reading through some of this stuff, but you know, when you realize that, you know, like an $80 shaky machine that you jiggle your butt on while you're making your dinner, or, you know, maybe it's some compressions, or, you know, maybe it's just understanding, you know, the activity's part of it, the food's harder, but there's lots of different approaches, but the self-care is only going to happen by you. So you
That,
can ask all the questions you want, but you've got to at some point, um, you know, do it. Do whatever the care is. Try something. I find it's an exciting month, and there's lots of new products out there. But revisit some of Marianne's older posts. Look at maybe Marianne, because I'm going off on a tangent here. Could you, in your group, if I'm a new member and I'm just coming in, what is the best place to navigate to become familiar with the material, and where should I start?
yeah, well, when people apply to join, we have 3 days before they can make a primary post. They can actually comment on other people's posts, but they can't make a primary post
Okay.
because we want everybody to check the admin notifications. There's some really fabulous admin notifications, and we want people to use the search function. So, for instance, I have written a very detailed article on what to do with your knees, because lipedema actually affects your knees. It changes the way we walk. And so I wrote this. I'd had bilateral knee replacements. They're both done on the same day. So that's my, I think I'll get straight into heaven because I did my purgatory on earth. But so, you know, it's really important. When I went through that process, I learned a really amazing fact, and that is that if you're going to have liposuction, you should have it before your knees are done, because you no longer have a blood supply in your knee. And if an infection gets in there, and you can get an infection from your teeth that will go to your knees. So it's a big deal. So you're better off having it so that you've got the blood supply in your knees, and then have the surgery afterwards, because there's a huge drop in the likelihood of infection. That's not to say you can't have liposuction, but it's a big thing that you should know about in order to make yourself an informed decision. So if you wanted to find out about knees, you've got a bit of lipedema around your knees, and or you've got the arthritis, all you have to do is go onto the little magnifying glass at the top and just type in knees, or even lipedema with knees, and that article and any discussion will come up. So we encourage people to use that, because we don't know what everybody's focus is. We all have a different kind of focus, and we're all in different places along our lipedema journey, depending on how long ago we were diagnosed. So that's what we encourage people to do. And if they want to ask something about, they want to find out about something, so that we don't get that constant repetition, sort of like everybody asking about, sort of 20 or 30 people asking about lipedema in knees in one day. We ask you to have a little look, see what you can find. If you can't find anything, that's fine. You can ask a question, but just to have a little look and see what you can find first, because there's an awful lot of information. As you can imagine, we've been going for 8 years. So there is a lot of information there. I just wanted to
point, and I'll add, and I didn't even think about it. So if you're going to look, you search and you pull up the post that Marianne's talking about, as admins, and I'm a solo one. I when you have multiples, you need to have system of how you're answering so everybody's getting the best information, I always say. But if you're going into that post and you do have a question, that's the best place to post it. So then Marianne knows that, okay, she did see this article. And more so what I find is, well, then 5 other people are asking neat questions. So everybody's getting directed to the best information, the best explanation. And more importantly, sometimes it's the chatter that happened in that initial discussion, some links, things like that. So that way it streamlines, and when you're looking for things, it builds. Then you got 3 or 4 good posts to look at versus 50 or 60 because you're reposting the same information. And so
that's right. And what happens when you make a comment on the thread of that post, you boost it up so that, sort of if somebody says something about knees, you boost that up. So in the group, that's up higher. So other people who might not have thought to look for lipedema in knees can see that. And then all of a sudden you've got a new fresh conversation happening about it.
Yeah. And then it's all in the same place. And tonight, for those of you that, and Alexis, I want to apologize to those of you that I drove crazy with my Zoom link tonight. 2 reasons that I do this. I dropped the link anywhere I shared the darn thing, and for exactly the reason Marianne said. Then it gets to the top because at about 5:02, everybody comes in and they're like, oh, where's the link? So the post is right there. But more importantly, with Zoom, because I'm going to record this and make it into something that Marianne can put on her page and wherever anybody, my stuff is always usable within this community. If anybody wants, just ask. But if I give you the link and Alexis goes in this morning and logs in, I get an email and a recording every time somebody logs in before I do. So I'm a late Lula. I never show up till 2 minutes before to make sure I look camera worthy. But so that's the reason. So I'm sorry if I ticked you all off a little bit, but you'll notice on all these pages now where Marianne and I posted this, they're that top post because there's been interaction with it. Facebook rewards you for doing those things and they bump you to the top kind of thing. Something else that I find interesting in Australia, and I had this explained to me a couple different ways, but I don't want to say that you guys ring the bell a little bit better. I don't know if there's more awareness. I think there's certainly a wider, you said yourself, this group's been around 8 years now. I think it's been established and the support has maybe been a little bit more organized, maybe, with the efforts that you've done. You go into the States and there's some amazing groups, but there's so many sometimes. And the thing that I love about the Warriors, never for any, sometimes I go in there and people, I don't have lipedema, so I know how it looks, oh, well, what are you here talking about? I'm just a chick that went, oh my gosh, I never knew about this, and have kind of been obsessed with the advocate ever since. But when I'm talking to clients on training calls, support calls, there does seem to be not only a better awareness of lipedema in that part of the world, but also my wheelhouse, the vibration plates. I wouldn't say that everybody personally in the community is using them, but it's certainly more common when I'm talking with my therapists, my hospitals, my doctors. Most of them at least have seen or touched one. And, the common sense of some of these tools, sometimes there's so many complicated things with this condition and so many nuances. And sometimes it's not just lipedema. Sometimes you got MS or you got fibro or Hashimoto's. There's all those synergies, right? So there isn't a playbook. I tend to focus more on symptoms. Symptoms can be universal. You can have swelling as a diabetic, and you can have. I learned in my chat with Emma from Lipedema Canada that you are less prevalent to get diabetes if you have lipedema. Something else I learned. I love doing these talks.
Expand on that. The placement of the fat, the gynoid fat on our legs and our backsides and our hips is actually diabetic protective. So, but if we have obesity with it, that chance of getting it it differs, because we then get the more apple-shaped fat as well, which is the visceral fat around our organs. So yes, I think Australia is pretty but people in Australia are pretty clued on. There's quite a few groups that have come out of Australia. My very first group was an Australian group called Lipedema. It was called LAS then, but Lipedema Australia something, and that was the very first group that I was a member of. So there's always, yeah, and I think uh, sort of, I think, well, maybe we're just a little bit into social media as well, and so the social media thing has gotten around. But I remember I joined around that time when Dr. Herbst had been out here, and they'd had their I'm not sure if it was the first or the second Lipedema Australia
Conference.
conference on Lipedema, and that was just around the time that I was joining. So it was a very serendipitous time because there were things happening and there was word getting out there, and sort of like I used to walk around, and this, my doctor had said it's extremely rare, and I'd walk around and I'd say, well, she's got legs like mine, or she's got arms like mine, and so I knew there were other people around, but they just, we were all being fat shamed, and we were all being told, and move more and eat less. And when we did move more and eat less, we ended up being, it was assumed that we were not really quite truthful about what was going on. So there was all this very demeaning, victim blaming and fat shaming aspect to the health system. And I guess that Australian women started having an FU moment, and and as word got out, and we started to see the need to support one another, and we were sort of spreading the word. And of course, that roller coaster that you go on when you first get diagnosed, it's like an enormous emotional roller coaster. You get up on the high because finally you're saying, this is not my fault and somebody's listening to me, and then you realize it's for life, and what can we do? And you go down into the depths, and then you've got to do this, and then you've got the sharp turns and the bone juddering ways of that you're removing on that really huge emotional roller coaster. But
the mental,
and as I say to my members, you're not alone on it anymore. Yeah. I will say in the Warriors, there are 17,000+ of us riding that roller coaster with you, cheering you on. And I think that's the secret to lipedema groups. We are there and we are cheering each other on, and we are there to support each other and help each other through.
It's a strength in numbers thing. And I think that the double-edged sword in this community, because the majority of people affected are women, but I know numerous men as well. It, as a girl to begin with, we've got that mentality. We're insecure. We're raised in a society now where it's more important, what you're wearing and than what's on your plate for dinner. I personally, as I said, do not have lipedema, but I'm not going to be as eloquent as Marianne was. You got pissed off first. The whole reason I even got into vibration machines like 20 years ago, I think I was about 30. How old am I now? Holy shit. Yeah, I'm that old. Okay. So I was like early 30s, and I blew my knee dancing young at a Christmas party. I was wearing the pantyhose, and I dislocated my knee. And I was up in like Igloo Land, Canada, working at this small bank, and all the banks partied together. So for years, everybody thought I was the drunk new chick that got carried out, but my knee was dislocated. Oh, the stories. But I left it and I left it. And I was a big girl growing up most of my life, but I played sports, but I got to a point where like it would lock up for 2-3 days, and I couldn't unlock it. And I was 50, 60 pounds overweight, but I kind of always, was bigger. So I go into this doctor's office after how many referrals and appointments to get to see that guy. And I get to the clinic, and it's 15 stairs to go down with my full leg brace that doesn't bend. And I'm thinking, are you frigging kidding me? Like, I must be in there. So I hobble back to the reception desk, and we've all had this story. There's an elevator at the other end of the building that's 6,500 square feet. So I finally get down there, wait for, I think, 3 hours to see him. And I just wanted to smoke. That was me in those days. So I finally get to see this guy, and all he says to me was, well, you're fat and you're getting old, it needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
So you know those sides where like you're not allowed to like yell at the medical staff, or so there's reasons those are in place. I was appalled and I thought, no, this can't be it. This can't be it. I got on a machine, the rest is history, but I never did get the knee replacement. But even though I'm slim and I'm fit and I feel better than I have in my life, I still buy shirts that are long enough to cover my bum. Like it scars you for life. The mental health is not something you can slip into your lymphopress and you know, have your glass of wine and have it go away. So it's, you know, it's very reckless whether you have a mild encounter, whether you have a massive encounter. It seems the one common thing everyone coming to these groups has is that fat shame story.
That's
You
right.
know, and it's not always fat. You know, sometimes it's not it's lipedema month, but Durkheim's disease. You know, these people will go in with 150 to 200 lymphomas and explain that they're a size 2. So you know that there's this whole community has you know, it's not acceptable that it's rare, but you know, until the medical community gets up to speed, this is your wheelhouse. So if for those anybody joining me to on my page or that's seeing this on a recorded basis that hasn't heard of the Warriors, I just want to stress you don't need to be from Australia. It is, but sometimes you don't want to change your name on Facebook either ways because you got cred sometimes too. I get a lot of grief. I probably should just change my name to whatever else I can help you with because I've diversified way beyond vibration machines too. But I call it fat disorders, and I get a lot of grief for that. But I always remember when I was first sort of learning about this, there wasn't a lot about like the stories were starting to come out and women showing themselves and but when I looked up fat disorders, I saw a whole lot of stuff. And you know, when you're sitting at home on the other side of the screen, you just know you got weird fat or fat that hurts or fat that feels weird or looks weird. You know, so we search what we know. Once we know that, then, you know, you didn't know yesterday what you did today. So you just do better, right? Um, my roundabout circle is actually bringing me to a question. If and I'm going to put Marianne on the spot a bit. I invited anybody if they did have questions, and I don't do a very good job of explaining this one myself, so I'm going to have you do it. Speaking of differences, the fat being different, what are the main visible differences or symptomatic differences between venous insufficiency and lipedema? That's another one nobody talks enough about. Can you chew that one for me?
Yeah. Well, you can have venous insufficiency and not have lipedema,
Yeah.
but lipedema actually is a connective tissue disorder.
So it's
And so that's why we have a very huge number of people who have comorbidities like hypermobility, EDS, and lots of other things, lots of other conditions with it. So venous issues can often go hand in hand with lipedema because we have faulty capillaries.
yeah.
That's the reason we leak the fluid into our interstitial spaces between our fat cells, and why we get the swelling. And with the sluggish lymphatic system, it's hard to pick it up and remove it, and we need to do wear compression and do MLD in order to help our lymphatic system function correctly. And it's a bit the same with our venous system. And gravity is our enemy. So our blood goes down into our legs, and there are little valves all the way down the veins and the arteries, or the veins rather, that are meant to operate and push that blood back up towards the heart. But with venous insufficiency, those little valves that are there don't work properly. So they're not pushing the blood back up and it gets trapped. So it's a completely different condition, but it's often common very, very common in people with lipedema. And so they then you know, sort of like, it's a very common comorbidity, and I would recommend that every woman with lipedema actually get to see a vein specialist at some time, and actually get their veins checked out. Easily they use Doppler tests, and they do other different things, and then take action to get that repaired, because once that's repaired, that's going to help the blood flow, and put less pressure on the lymphatic system.
Would
I
it
hope
be
that's
fair to say, Walmart shopper here, is Venus, isn't it really more like a symptom than, you know what I
it
mean?
it 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 can be a symptom, but not everybody who has lipedema has venous insufficiency.
You know what I mean? So it can be a diagnosis, and I get this all the time in my cerebral palsy group with seizures. You know, everybody assumes if you've ever had a seizure, oh, you must have epilepsy. Well,
Yeah,
no, epilepsy is a thing.
yeah,
That's a thing. A
and that's
seizure, it is a symptom kind of associated with that, but there's lots of different reasons people have seizures. You know, if you take
yes,
your high-heeled shoe off and smack your hubby upside the temple, he might just have a seizure. So,
yeah.
you know, maybe thank you for clarifying, because I know it's its own thing, but because I see it so, and probably later stage where the veins have progressed,
Yeah.
or the weight, you know, so that condition or symptom, whatever we would identify it with, that makes sense, because I do see that in other conditions, but it's common. I don't want to say common, but I think it is fairly common with lipedema, but it doesn't mean everybody has it.
So basically, what I'm saying is, you wouldn't say, if you had a list of symptoms for lipedema, you wouldn't have venous insufficiency written down as a symptom, but you would have it written down as a very common comorbidity.
Okay, okay.
Right,
Whereas,
which is a bit like that, a cycle thing. So you've got this comorbidity, which is going to affect your lipedema, and your lipedema is going to affect that comorbidity. So once it begins to cycle, once it's present, but it's not always present, and certainly early stage 1 and 2 often don't have any venous issues. That comes with development, and some do have venous issues. So, because
I will
if
say,
there's one thing about lipedema, it presents differently with almost every woman.
exactly, exactly. So for those of you that are using vibration plates, I have a tangent on the calves still. I see it. The reason I'm kind of curious is it's also very common with any of my cardiac folks. Anybody, you know, that you get nagged at the therapist to work on that leg strength on the calves to help the blood return for a lot of the same reasons. And if you've ever been through a cardiac event of any kind, you don't tend to have a lot of wind and energy. So there's a lot of people using them. You know, if you're being guided by me, understand there's really no such thing as a contraindication. There's a discussion first. I don't go by lists, because for the same thing Marianne's saying, everybody's different. So a lot of companies don't support lots of things, especially things that don't exist, like lipedema and unicorns. But heart conditions is a very common one. And there's a lot of people, because of the intricacies of some of these comorbidities, venous insufficiency being one with them too, companies selling equipment aren't medical experts. They're not even often experienced in using the gear they're selling you. They're a company. So people, you know, we go to these, sometimes the wrong group, and we're asking, let's say, for example, Life Pro or Pinty's a vibration machine down there, or your massage gun company. If you've got lipedema, they don't have a protocol. They don't have a 3-step program, and the study doesn't exist either, because none of them know about vibration machines, let alone lipedema. So we're still kind of caught in this. You know, Marianne's group is such an invaluable resource, because even though, you know, a lot of this stuff lacks even a diagnosis for some of you, it's about the individual symptoms. And if you are dealing with weak calves, you know, heck, heart conditions could be a subcondition of what you're dealing with lipedema, calf raises, stretches. But yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. If you haven't had your veins checked, if you have a diagnosis, I think it's probably on the list, and you would have been maybe advised to do that. But if you suspect, or you're somewhere where you just can't get the diagnosis, but you know what you're dealing with, that's a really good thing to consider going and seeing it. Because a lot of times, I don't know about in Australia, but in the States and certainly in Canada, a lot of vascular surgeons and a lot of these vein clinics might recognize the condition too sometimes, you know, because
Yes, and in Germany,
yeah,
vascular surgeons are some of the top surgeons that do lipedema, liposuction for lipedema.
makes
There's
sense.
one other thing I think is really worth touching on too. We have a wonderful vein specialist in Australia called Dr. Lekic, and he went to Germany and studied with Dr. Heck because he had discovered lipedema and he felt that women really needed more support. And so he started up his lipedema, but he discovered that women, 25% of everybody who's ever born are born with a hole in the heart. And 99.9% of the time, they don't even know they have a hole in their heart and it makes no difference. But because he's a vein specialist, he always sent women, he would get a medical history and he would find women who had migraines with aura, right? Because migraines with aura can be an indicator of having a hole in the heart. So he would ask any woman before he did his surgery, and he would send them off to have a bubble test to check to see if they have a hole in the heart. And what he found was very interesting. There was no bigger incidence. It was still the 25% of people that were going off, that were being discovered with holes in the heart. But he discovered that the PFO, the hole in the heart, was larger. Is likely to be larger on women with lipedema. So if you are a woman who has migraines, I've had migraines. They started when I was about 36, 37 years old, and I had classic migraines, aura, light in the black room, just, you know, nausea, sound, everything, the whole lot. So I thought, well, I'm going to go and have a PFO test and have the bubble test. Now, I did not have a hole in the heart at all. It was absolutely fine. So you can have migraines with aura without it, but it's a big indicator that you could have a hole in your heart. And he sends all his patients to get that test done, just to be on the safe side before he will have do surgery on them. And I think that's, you know, that's a little bit of niche knowledge that's come out of Australia. And I remember Anka was going to go to the big conference in the US, the FDR conference in the US, and she was going to present a paper that on behalf of Dr. Lekic about, you know, what he had discovered, and of course COVID broke out, so that conference didn't go ahead. So yeah, it's a little bit of niche knowledge that has come out of Australia, that if you do have migraines that come with the aura, the visual interference, it's a really good idea just to get that checked out. And he's had it, and if they have the hole in the heart, that gets repaired before he'll do surgery.
Would you have a link or an article in the group, something where somebody could read more on that?
Yeah, if people who are in the Lipedema Warriors go in and type in a hole in the heart or PFO, they'll get an article that Anka has written about the incidence of larger PFOs in women with lipedema.
And so yeah, COVID happened, and there's been 2 FDRSs since. I went to the last one prior. This is the kind of shit that needs to get out. Oh my gosh.
It is. It definitely is. It definitely is.
Awesome.
And so you know, sort of we also have it in our, as you said, we've got different groups. We have a group, because we've become international, and, you know, sort of, if you're in America, you don't want to be hearing about what's going on in Australia. If you're in the UK, you don't want to, you don't need to know about what therapists to go to.
Certainly.
So we started an Australian group so that therapists and doctors could be discussed without sort of other people having to plough through it. Then we started what we call the Luscious Ladies, and that is for people like me, stage 3, 4, that need a little bit more support. They often need more mental health support. Then we have the stage 1, 2 group. And the stage 1, 2 group, we started that off because these girls, these young women that are in the stage 1, 2, and they're mostly young women. There are some older women there that haven't progressed, but they're mostly young women. They are absolutely so anxious about having lipedema. They're much more anxious than older women that get a diagnosis. They are just so anxious. And part of that is because they watch their grands, they watch their aunties, they watch their mums. They know what can happen to them, and they're terrified of it. And so they'll put up a photo of their legs, and the legs kind of look gorgeous, but they've still got that fear, and they've still got lipedema. And they get on there and they'll say, and we found them getting on our group, and they were saying, do you think I've got, what do you think? Do you think I've got lipedema? Because they're terrified. And then we'll get, some people that will say, well, and or your son, and that was very, because it kind of demeaned their fears, and it kind of just said, oh, yeah, go away, your legs are fine. It was that kind of an attitude. So we decided to start a group specially for them, where they could post as many photos and they could talk, but they didn't have and I don't think anybody means stuff like that. I think they think that it's a bit of a compliment to say, I wish I had your legs, love. But actually it demeans them, and it's kind of like putting them into a box. Get back into your box. Stop complaining about your lipedema, because I've got lobules hanging off my legs, so I'm much worse. So we started the lipedema group, and we have a rule that if you are at stage 1, you post your photos there, and it's for their safety, it's for their mental safety, so that they're not putting up with old farts like me saying, well, that's nothing compared to what I've got. So because comparisons are always going to be odious, and these young girls have got knowledge that we didn't have. We didn't know about lipedema. We didn't know that it was something you could get from your grandmother through your dad. We didn't know about that. We just had big legs, and we just had to get on with it and deal with it. And whereas these our daughters and our granddaughters are much more knowledgeable, than, because if you don't know, you don't worry about it, kind of thing. You might worry about your legs and say, well, I don't know why I've got a big bum, or I don't know why my legs are big. But if you don't know that it's going to progress and go forward, you just keep trying to diet. You just get on with life. So that's the reason we have the different groups.
And it works both ways, actually, because sometimes when you don't know what you're dealing with, I live in a very small town of 4,000 people where most people know me. Yes, I was the one that grabbed your knees at the post office. I can't help myself. I'm just like Marianne. I think you have lipedema. But sometimes people, the younger ones that are just, they look at, the larger stage 3, stage 4. And like I say, it's not just sometimes a lipedema thing. Maybe you're dealing with other stuff.
Yeah.
And, aren't as kind. They haven't climbed the amount of hills and the amount of miles that we have. So sometimes the filter, it works both ways. People will come in.
It does.
So and weight loss is another. I'm going to bring it up because it's my mission this month. You have lipedema. Yes, you can lose weight, and yeah, you might be able to tolerate heat, and you might even be able to use massage guns and things. So a lot of these groups are about not only trying new things, but revisiting them. you know, whether that's revisiting information. Um, you know, there was such an influx to Marianne's groups. They've had several it's good that you're catering to different demographics, because there are a lot of us in this community that have daughters.
Yeah,
And it's how nice is it to have somewhere to go through this learning journey, whether it's for yourself or to support them, because you know, they don't always talk to you about everything either. You know, everybody learns differently and absorbs differently. And I know my daughter, she'd prefer to go read about it, then we'll talk about it, as opposed to mom, just let me look at it from, she's more of an introvert.
yeah, yeah.
So, you know, everybody learns in their own way. And unlike, to your point, you know, 20 odd years ago when you discovered this, you know, I don't think we all even had emails, you know, regularly,
No,
you know.
no.
The other thing and this isn't a big medical breakthrough moment. There's two things I've learned that I can't wait to go read more about. But um I think it's very important to understand that whether you have a diagnosis or you do not have a diagnosis, sometimes you can see in your kids the characteristics, you know, that maybe not to this. So I think you're probably going to see an influx. I can't think of any other groups that cater specifically to that stage 1, stage 2. And I think if the information and the self-care can start earlier,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
know the effects of that. And so I can't think of it. There may be out there, but it's probably I'm part of that group as well. And I know, like in my group, it's nice for some that, you know, are coming in and they want to lose 10, 15 pounds. But to your point, you know, that they're stage 1. But if I can get them into the habit of using the machine, not just for the workout, because that sometimes is an age thing too, but for the symptom management, just get the
Yeah.
lymph moving, use it before you head out the door. It's this is all about setting habits and sticking with them. And you know, if something works and it feels good, then do more of it. If it's not something you enjoy, or you know, the suggestion just isn't something realistic that you as a person would do, the great thing about a group like Marianne's and the subgroups is there's more than one or two ways to navigate down that path, you know.
That's right.
um
And my advice in regard to care, I don't refer to lipedema care anymore as self-care,
okay.
because I refer to it as lipedema care. It's a really, really important aspect of managing this disease. But we can become obsessed by it. We can absolutely become so obsessed by this disease that we become obsessed with doing absolutely everything to try and uh, control it and get it, get some kind of power over the way the disease affects you. And it can actually become a huge burden. And lipedema care can actually start robbing you of a lot of joy in life, because you've got to get on your machine and do your exercise. And I've got to do that for 30 minutes, and I've got to do it twice a day, and I've got to get into the pump, and I've got to lie there for an hour twice a day on the pump, and I'll get my massage gun, and I'll do this, and it can just really overwhelm your life. So my recommendation, and this is just personally for me, is that I talk about self-care as being something that pampers you, something that you love to do. My biggest self-care routine is getting up on my bed with my legs up, cup of coffee beside me, and my favorite book or a good movie, because that's me taking time to restore my spirit.
Yep.
Sort of, I used to love having a bath, lying in bath and I can't get out the bath anymore, so it's only showers for me. I mean, we really shouldn't be having really hot baths either. But you find that thing, going for a facial, getting your nails done. I go for a 30-minute walk most days, and I go on a little route around my neighborhood where I know I'm going to hear the bird song, because birdsong just fills my soul. It just renews my spirit. That's what I call self-care. and then the rest I call lipedema care. And I quite often advise warriors to try and find a bit of balance. So what I tend to do is I use my vibration plate 3 days a week. I'll use my massage gun 2 days a week. I go to the pool twice a week, and I exercise twice a week in the pool. I do 30 minutes of walking just to warm myself up, and then I do an hour of deep water running, which is fantastic because it burns up 40% more energy than running on land. And with having lipedema, we all know we can't drown. We just float. So it's very easy for us to actually get the running. I've seen other people saying, "Oh, I'm going to try and do that," and they just can't. They need a flotation belt, but I don't. So I try to sort of build into it the walk, which is still lipedema care, but I'm getting the self-care of listening to the birds and being out in the sunshine. So there's those both aspects. And of course, lipedema affects us. It affects our self-esteem. It affects how our self-esteem, our self-worth. Sort of there are people who won't have mirrors in their houses because they don't want to. Don't want to. They're so traumatized by the lipedema that they don't want to see what they look like. And this is the self-care and the mental health aspect of lipedema is something that I think we do particularly well in promoting in the lipedema warriors. I think, sort of like we have our how you're doing mental health check every week. I started that during COVID, and you don't even have to write anything. All you have to do is put a red star to say you're fantastic, or put a purple star to say you're feeling brokenhearted. And I personally respond to every person who goes on that. Might not be, we've got time zones, remember, so it might not be immediately when you write it on there, but I do. And we also have the vent lounge. And you can vent about anything in the vent lounge. And the thing is, if you don't want to read about that, if you find that reading about other people being upset about something brings you down, they're in a place where you say, "Oh, I'm not going into the vent lounge." But if you feel that you want to put in something in the vent lounge, I just recently had something that really distressed me. I got basically treated very poorly by a compression company, and they ended up a compression company that sells compression targeted for lipedema, and they actually said, they basically fat shamed me and body shamed me, and I was really distressed about that. And I didn't want to bring everybody else down, so I put my feelings to that in the vent lounge. So we actually try to cater for people and make places safe where they can actually go and say, "Well, I've had a shit day and this is what happened to me. I went to the doctors and this is what they said." But without being a main post where everybody that comes into the group, starts to read it.
Hijacking someone else's post. I had a
Yeah.
good day. Yeah, well, I had and sometimes, everything in balance, as you said earlier, sometimes you just need to get it off your chest. It's not that I'm, venting is, think what is a vent? Well, things move through it, right? So,
Yes.
if you never get pissed off and you never scream out loud, or you never, sometimes the type talk is hard because, feelings, and, sometimes I sound more pissed off. I read a comment, "Oh, I sounded like I was mad," or, the written word is not the
Yeah.
same, but sometimes just by doing that physical action of typing it out or writing it on a piece of paper and burning it, allow yourself to it's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to cry. What I thought was so funny when you were telling this story, I bet you 20 years ago you'd been falling your face off, but did you notice how her cheeks were getting redder? That warrior in Marianne came out when she was telling that story. So that, sometimes, and I know for me, even when I have my worst day, and I'm too accessible, I rarely turn down a message for help. And you know, sometimes, you know, I need to reach out, but I think I'm weak if I need help or something. But it's strange because folks like Marianne and some of my gals over here, it's kind of like you just know. You can tell you've known me long enough sometimes by the way I tell. Well, I'm sure she didn't mean it. She's probably a little pissed off today. And you know, I don't have a vent lounge in my group, and that's actually a really good idea because sometimes, you know, in a post or something you've read online, it might not even be something that happened right now. It's just a trigger, and you want to, but it's healthy to, you know, be pissed off
Get
at the
it out.
doctor. Don't be pissed off at you, right?
Part of the journey to get rid of something that's causing angst within you is to get it out.
Yep.
And the good thing about having a vent lounge, it doesn't actually have to be anything about lipedema. It can be, you know, it
Yeah.
people are free to you know, if they, you know, sort of went next door and, you know, stood in the dog poo, you know, and they had to
Or
clean their
not,
shoes or whatever. You
like,
can vent about really mundane things like that too, because it just helps you get it out and it's a safe place to. And you'll find often in the lipedema warriors who say it's not about lipedema, but, you know, and they'll just get that vent out, and that's a really
people there with other things too. And you know, believe it or not, everybody here with lipedema has other lives and other problems and other, you know, sometimes to your point, we get so wrapped up and so overwhelmed in this. I hate labels, you know, because a lot of times there's misdiagnoses too in some of my
yes,
other group. But you know, forget the label. You know, it's not an identity, you know, it's not a relationship. Focus on the symptoms. And I like Marianne's approach. You know, look, I like to talk more like symptom management than workout. You know, I hate the word diet. I hate the word workout. They're all these negative triggers. And the interesting thing you said about finding things that you enjoy, allow yourself first of all to enjoy them. But food's the same. Amy, the lippy nutritionist down there, you know, she enjoys food, and she, you know, half the time I'm running around worrying about my kids and what I'm making for dinner tonight. You know, we don't have that. We have a hate relationship with our food sometimes when we're just women that are carrying extra pounds. Forget that it's, you know, lipedema or diabetes or whatever it may be. But you know, try and find, instead of looking at all the things you can't have, you know, and you know, sometimes you just have it anyways because emotionally, you know, you just want to. That's okay. But you know, try and find a few things that you enjoy, you know, instead of it being you know, oh, I have to eat this salad, as opposed to, oh, well, I'm gonna enjoy this chicken. Or you know, if maybe it's a cheeseburger once in a while too. But you know, we punish ourselves for everything. It's always our fault. And it can be a very lonely, frustrating feeling. And you know, when life gets in the way upon other things, I think where the vent lounge is such a good idea is it's hard when you're a person with lipedema. Sometimes because we're shamed because of the condition and the associations, we don't want to vent to regular people because they don't get it. You know, they don't
no,
get
that's
that
right.
you're dealing with all this pain and all this other crap on top of the, you know, it could be the crossing guard at the school that, you know, didn't do it. You know, there's always, you know, sometimes we're just triggered and people don't realize the enormity of the stress that you're carrying. And from stress, guess what? Again, inflammation. So, you know, the best advice that came out of Marianne's mouth tonight is, and I got to listen, is, you know, sometimes maybe it's a walk night, or maybe you don't have to do everything all the time, but find some time for you, whether that's eating ice cream or aquasizing in the pool. And I think, you know, where it's so beneficial is that you just got to check out mentally and focus on something else. And it's like if you don't get a good night's sleep, you know, after a few nights you get cranky. If you just let it bottle up in that woman brain, because we're women on top of this, we analyze everything. You know, give yourself a break, right? Give yourself a
And
break.
there's one other little thing I think is really important for us to understand, and particularly the young ones who have just been diagnosed. We are not a disease, and our disease is not us. It
Yes.
is an aspect of us, but we are fabulous mothers. We are compassionate women. We are athletes, we are well, I speak 5 languages, so I mean, I've got something that is uniquely me that I bring to the table. I get someone from Denmark or Norway and I can chat to them in their own language. So I was a gifted teacher. We have to recognize in us those wonderful things that make us who we are, because we are not lipedema.
Yep.
Um, we are who we project into the world. So if we're going to project that I'm just a big disease, or I'm just an uncomfortable disease, or I'm just a painful disease, that gets into our psyche. So we need to constantly remind ourselves, I'm a grandmother. I absolutely adore my grandchildren, and they adore me, and that's a huge part of my so we take the labels off, and like, we've got all these different hats that we can put on, and all of those hats make up the marvelous person who each and every one of us is. And that, sort of when someone comes into the vent lounge, and not the vent lounge, the mental health check, and talks about where they're at, I'll quite often say, but you're a lot more than just lipedema.
Yeah.
You're a compassionate woman. You support your other women with lipedema. You wouldn't be here writing in this if you weren't. But you're also talented in your job, and you're also a mother, and you're also a wife, and there's so many different facets to each and every one of us, and we need to maintain that kind of balance. I really and truly think that having lipedema is about finding balance in absolutely every aspect of your life.
And people, like, this is perfectly segueing into the other thing I want to mention, that Australia and New Zealand do better than us over here on the other side of the pond. It's cool we can do this online, but I think where we highlight and we lift ourselves up the best is face to face. I always love doing this versus a comment, but even better than this is the one thing I see going on there more than anywhere is the luncheons. The luncheons,
Yes, yeah.
you can't always go to them, and even though I never probably, like, I've been to Australia for vibration machines, but it was before I really knew who Marianne was. I was in Melbourne at La Trobe, ridiculing a bunch of physical therapists for not using their vibration equipment, but they were scared of it. What? But anyways, I don't get to go to lunch, but sometimes I make these little smart ass comments about, oh, what's where, I'd love to join you. And I think it's, whether you can join or not, it's its own little thing in itself. Are you going to be there? And this, Australia is a pretty big place. Western Australia is a big place too.
Oh, it's huge.
So for those of you that do, if you only ever make it to one, or, even if it's, you would like to get one started in your area, I think it's
Absolutely
really cool. And I'd love to see more of there's a local one here. Lipedema Canada has there's a new association and a Facebook group. And I think within the first week, there was a gal 2 hours north of me. She's like, is there anybody in Alberta that wants to get together for lunch? And I thought, well, you're only 2 hours north, and Calgary and Edmonton, which are our two big centers, are about a 3-4 hour drive apart. Well, I'm right in the middle. So I thought, ooh, hey, I don't have lipedema, but most of them know me. So, look what you've inspired. And, good ideas can be duplicated. And, nothing beats being in person. There's an energy exchange. You get to lift each other up, and you guys are very consistent about that. Before I drop the big plug, when is your next luncheon coming up in your neck of the woods?
Actually, it's the 22nd, I think. It's the fourth Saturday in each month. So I think it's the 22nd of June.
Perfect.
And then we've got other things. Sorry?
I said it's coming up next week then.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. So if you didn't know about this, because sometimes when a group gets this big, Facebook actually used to, but it doesn't let us tag everybody. It doesn't let us invite everybody. So we do our best to let everybody know about things. But if you haven't been to a lunch, or this is the first you're hearing of it, you usually, like, I know even though it's the same time all the time, you post it a couple times prior, just as a reminder
Yes,
as
yes.
well.
We have a local Lipedema group as well, and it's kind of affiliated with the Warriors, but it's also affiliated with the other Australian groups as well.
Okay.
And Jennifer Free is the administrator of the Lipedema Western Australia, and she organises the luncheons, and so she'll put a reminder up in her group, and then I'll put a reminder up in the Australian group and in the general group. And then if I remember, I'll take some photos and pop them on.
Okay.
But it's a really worthwhile thing to do because
Awesome.
you catch up. First of all, you develop friends. So two of my dearest friends now is both Jennifer Free, and I can see Jackie Duff is here. Hi, Jackie. Um,
That's awesome.
so we sometimes catch up at other times, particularly Jackie and I.
Yep.
We sometimes I'll sort of we'll catch up from time to time, and so you form friendships, and it's so lovely to have friendships with people who actually understand a particularly less desirable aspect of your life. Nobody desires to have lipedema, but you've got that support, and you can phone each other, and you can say, how are you doing today, and sort of. It's a really wonderful thing to do, and I've met so many absolutely inspiring women at our lunches.
Well, and we
Absolutely
all want to
inspiring.
belong. We all want to be a part of something. And if, back to your point earlier, if it's about lifting each other up and, okay, so we've got this thing, we can deal with this, but you're so much stronger together. Um, Jennifer, on a quick note, because I nagged her, I wasn't sure. I knew you guys were friends, but I didn't know if you were talking before. But I messaged Jennifer. She had an appointment today, and I promised, she said, of course, everybody knows Marianne. But Western Australia, the next luncheon is at Kings Park, Zarnia Cafe, except December and January. The next one is Saturday, the 23rd of June, she said.
Yeah, yeah,
They have a photo shoot also coming up
that's
on the
right.
14th of July and an awareness day on the 27th of July. We dedicated those. So maybe what we'll do is after we get the recording, I had to plug this because I promised her that I would. She's been an awesome connection for me too. But there's a the information absolutely is posted in the groups regularly, but I'll make sure, because we've talked about it on the live, we'll get some links in the comments once we get this recording up. There's so much going on this month for lipedema. It's
Yeah.
it's great because there's all this awareness, but it's one of those years where, like, even if I sat down and watched all my faves, there's no time in the day to see them all. So for those of you that have joined me here, I'm going to stop rambling. And before it gets too late, I want to see if any of you that are, I see Jackie, we've got Jen, Kathy, Becky, Alexis, and Lisa. Do any of you have questions for Marianne that you would like her brilliant mind to answer for you? If you do, just raise your hand and unmute yourself. See what a good job that the warrior, they have no questions because they're all so smart with the information that Marianne gives them. So I need to get my poop together in my group and start taking some of her notes and examples. Does anyone have questions for me since you're here? You may or may not, and you certainly don't have to. See, I've talked them all to sleep again, Marianne. It's what I do.
No, that's what I do too.
I was really we didn't do the big education piece today, but it's really really long overdue. I know some of you over in Marianne and Jen's side of the world, and the New Zealand folks too. Like, all my lives that I do aren't always in the best time zone. So I've kind of, for the last couple months, been back and forth with Marianne, and I would love to do something like this. Maybe again, more vibration machine, or if you guys want to blast me about red lights or PEMF or any, I kind of, with my whole knee, just like many of you guys, I have a very big curiosity, and if there's no curiosity, you don't, science doesn't occur, for that matter. So, and it's okay to get pissed off, as I said. When I get pissed off, then I do lots of research and I learn, because the German in me has to be right all the time or find a different way. So, I would love if you do have questions, for those of you that are watching this for Marianne or myself, just put a comment in this. I'll get this up on YouTube and in our groups. But I would like to invite myself maybe back another time, whether it's on Marianne's group or mine, and do a vibration machine and self care tool session, lipedema
Yeah,
care
that'd be great.
tool. That's what I'm gonna do. But I'm it's summer here, so it's getting into winter for you guys. The reason I
Yes.
raise that is nobody in the Australian hemisphere ever wants to book one-on-ones with me after about 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning in the summer, because it's too darn hot. So I get much busier with my one-on-ones and other things this time because it's cooler. You could be active longer. It's
Yeah.
not so hot. Is Perth as warm as where I was at in Sydney and Melbourne?
Oh,
Is
we've just had the hottest summer on record, and
that right?
Perth is actually hot. Perth is actually hotter than summer, hotter in summer than Sydney.
Okay.
Um, we have temperatures. Probably our average summer temperature is about 36 degrees, whereas Sydney's cooler, but we can go up as high as 47.
So just like, something else to deal with on top of the other stuff, right? So, but I
Yeah.
always used to find that funny. The company I used to work with, I just did support calls for the local area when I started, and I would always have these late nights and early mornings, and I'd sleep because nobody wanted to work. It was too hot, and until I went myself in the middle of your winter, and I'm walking around like this in my shorts, and oh, you must be from Canada. And I always thought it was because of my clothes, but no, it was because I said A so many times. I always say A. So yeah, I do. I don't do y'all. That's for my Texas gals. But this has been good. I'm gonna let you guys have your morning. It is 8:20 my time in the evening. So the time change is actually pretty good for me. Maybe Marianne and I will talk here about another session later on down the road. But do check out the events going on. There's numerous ones. If you haven't checked out a luncheon, or you're in the area and you just say next time, that there's nothing holding you back, not even including 40-degree temperatures. So was there anything you wanted to mention, Marianne, that I rambled over, or you maybe haven't brought up yet?
No, I think we covered so much this morning, but I'd just like to say thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an absolute blast, and I've enjoyed sharing my experience. And I don't know that it's actually wise, but it is what it is. And if I can help anyone in any way with their lipedema, myself and all of the other admins in the Lipedema Warriors are absolutely there for you.
Awesome. And I like I say, I'm a one-man show on my group, which is getting astronomical. Don't tell me this is a common. It's not common. There's 14,000 women using vibration plates with lipedema or Durkheim's in my group. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know what? So we know there's more than we're. So I appreciate you allowing me to deflect. But I thought it was well overdue. There's so many people from that part of the world. You're going through this learning journey. Sometimes, the vibration machine is the first thing you look at, and you come to my group and you had no idea about the warriors. And that's starting to happen as we both get bigger. So if you're not a member, even European, there's so many family connections between Italy and Spain, and there's some really better time zones, and the warriors, the fact that you've broken it down into the different stages is a really good way to not only help shorten the learning curve. You don't need to learn it all right now when you're having this diagnosis, but I've had so many conversations with moms lately that are, exactly what you said. What, my daughter knows it's coming. But if we navigate and conduct ourselves in the positive fashions, and I know you can't do that all the time, but
Yeah.
part of having these infrastructures, whether it's for yourself or your family members, is it's coping, and it's
Yeah.
free therapy. We don't even charge you to be there. So I'm just blessed that Marianne and I have known each other as long as we have. We kind of got into this lipedema rat race, me meeting Dr. Herbst on one end of the country, you on the other. It goes to show you what a small world it is. And with these type of things, we hope to make it less small all the time. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And my last word will be, we are not without power.
Yep.
We are not without power.
Yep. And more powerful together. So
yes,
thank you everybody that joined us here tonight. I appreciate you listening to me ramble. I know it's morning there, but if it was an evening session, what a good sedative. And if you're joining me and you're not a member of my group, that'll all be in here as well. Alexis, just want to say thank you very much for the session. I'm at the point of discouragement. Let's take a look here and see. Has encouraged me to attend this meeting. Well, and I was, if you saw me exiting the screen, I was trying to drop the link everywhere, and I wanted to make sure I knew Alexis for sure. And I know, Lisa, I think there was a few folks looking for the links, but for future Facebook with private groups, I can't put up one event and it show up and it stays in the group. So instead of putting it on my public page and confusing you with a different name, I've got like 1,000 people on my public page. I've got 14,000 in my fat disorders group. So, I always just post the information in the event. So for future, whether you're seeing that link through Marianne's, as long as you're a member of mine or hers, but Zoom also allows, and I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but for future, if you've never joined me for a Zoom, the other reason I do a Zoom link is maybe you've got a daughter, or maybe you've got a mom or a neighbor, and they just don't do Facebook. You know, I don't love Facebook either, but it's kind of the one place you can do the most stuff. So feel free, send it to a friend, or maybe you've got someone that's not feeling well and can't join you and they want to watch from home. You can share the Zoom link once you've got it. I'm fine with you guys. I'd rather people get better information than frustrated because they couldn't get in and figure out how to work. Marianne and I were joking for a couple days before here because I'm not super technical. You know, I navigate through my videos because I have to, and I'm too cheap to pay someone. But sometimes, I don't have the fancy tech skills on these things. So her and I were joking back and forth. Well, I don't have all the tech skills. Well, we'll figure it out. I'll meet you on Facebook in 5 minutes. And look at, here we are with all of you lovely ladies today. Yeah. So thank you very much. When will this be replayed? Give me a couple days to get the editing. Sometimes I cut out my rambling. I don't think I dropped any F-bombs tonight. I did drop a few S-bombs, but I go back and take those out too, because, Facebook don't like that stuff. And I'm sorry if I did offend anyone. I tend to be a bit of a truck driver. I have too much of a filter, and I just advocate too much. Today's Thursday. I'll probably have it up and ready by Saturday, my side. So probably Saturday evening or Sunday morning, you'll see it. And I'll post it first as a YouTube link. So whether you're in a group or not, and then Marianne will also post it, and I will post it in our group as a group video separately. But I get it up on YouTube so everybody can get watching it, and then we'll get that up there. It takes an incredibly long time, not just the editing, but the one I uploaded from Amy, the nutritionist in Sydney there 2 weeks ago, took 4.5 hours for YouTube to upload an hour video. So, and then I walked away and it fell asleep, and so this is my tech skills. Thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day. It's your weekend almost, so enjoy it. Mine will be tomorrow. Maybe that's the universe telling me that I've rambled too long. So on that note, thank you again. And certainly message me. Sometimes, you're watching this on a recorded basis, or you're reflecting after your head stops spinning from all my talking, and then you have a question. So feel free to always, in my posts, it's easy, tag me at Debby with a Y. Sometimes, if there's 156 posts, there's a lot of Debbies. The Debbie's a really common name. I wonder what the association is with the name Debby and lipedema, because I got a lot of Debbies, but it's more commonly IE. So a lot of times people think they're tagging me, but it's Debby McKay or Debbie Smith, and I don't want you thinking that I missed your message. And I don't like to invite a bunch of personal messages, because I wake up to hundreds every day, as I'm sure Marianne does. But if it's ever urgent, if you're ever in harm's way, if that's just the only way that you feel comfortable, I'm always accessible. Okay. Thank you again so much, Marianne. I appreciate your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure.